ग्लेनईगल्स अस्पताल में मुंबई का इस साल का पहला डोमिनो किडनी ट्रांसप्लांट। मुंबई परेल स्थित ग्लेनईगल्स अस्पताल में इस साल का पहला डोमिनो किडनी ट्रांसप्लांट किया गया है। किडनी की प्रतीक्षा कर रहे 3 मरीजों की परिजनों ने अपने प्रियजन की जान बचाने के लिए एक दूसरे के प्रियजन को किडनी दान करने जान बचाई है। ग्लेनईगल्स अस्पताल के डॉक्टर भरत शाह, डॉक्टर प्रदीप राव, डॉक्टर जितेंद्र जगपात और डॉक्टर श्रुति तापियावाला के नेतृत्व में मुंबई का इस साल का पहला डोमिनो किडनी ट्रांसप्लांट किया गया है। उन्नत प्रत्यारोपण, प्रतिरक्षा निदान और HLA चिकित्सा में स्वीकार्य मिसमैच तकनीकों का लाभ उठाते हुए डोमिनो प्रत्यारोपण ने अत्यधिक संवेदनशील मरीजों की अनूठी चुनौतियों का समाधान किया, जो कि प्रत्यारोपण आबादी का केवल 7-10% है, जो हमारे राज्य और देश के लिए गुर्दा प्रत्यारोपण में एक नया मील का पत्थर है।
Which has happened here, and all of us know that this place is known for its transplant program for years together. We've been doing kidney, liver, pancreas, intestine, hand, everything. But this is one of its kinds that where simultaneously 3 recipients, 3 donors, all at one go has happened, and we are so proud to see that the result is so good and so nice. Of course, we've been doing donor recipient, single donor, single recipient. We've also done swabs here, as we talk today. Now also we are doing a swab, up there in our OT. But when it comes to dominoes, it's a daunting task where everybody has to come together and simultaneously work. And when you see the donor recipients and when we see their smiles, we really feel very contented that the team here working in Gleneagles has worked tirelessly to make all happen. Of course, when we say that it all happened in one day, but when we had to actually make it happen, it took months of planning to make it happen actually. So I would like all of you all to give a big round of applause to the team. As well as to the families, as well as to the recipients and donors, who actually made all it. Actually, it happened because of them, isn't it? So this basically press conference that we wanted to have is just to make sure that the awareness about all these things should be there. It's not that if you don't have a donor and there is no match available, then you can't go for it. If people work in tandem and if everybody comes together, the domino can happen in n numbers. Like here there are 3 recipients and 3 donors. It could be n number of donors and n number of transplants.
So there are 2 types of antibodies which can make it difficult for a family member to donate the kidney. You can have antibodies to the blood group, and you can have antibodies to what is called as tissue typing, which determines the identity of each individual. Over the years, we have been able to overcome the blood group antibody barrier by doing a desensitization process, and now we at our center do many ABO incompatible transplants after doing a process where the antibodies are removed, and once the antibody levels come down, then you can do the transplant. What is more difficult is to do a transplant when there is an HLA or tissue incompatibility. These antibodies are difficult to remove, and even if you desensitize, there is a high chance of rejection happening after the transplant. So we have a registry which is called a solid organ renal transplant registry, called SORTER, in which we try and keep data of every patient who is facing this problem, where the family donor is where the recipient is sensitized to the family donor. We keep a data, we maintain a registry, and we try and provide the paste match. So if the recipient does not have antibodies to the tissue type of the donor, even if they are from a different family, it is better to do a transplant without desensitization, because then the risk of rejection is less. So this is what has been done in these 3 cases. You can see that patients have come from across the country, from Hyderabad, and there are 3 different families, and just because we did a proper immunological match, we could do all the 3 transplants successfully. Otherwise, these 3 patients were waiting for a long time to get an appropriate match. And this is what a good registry can do, can find an appropriate match for a patient who is waiting because he is highly sensitized.
Richa said this was a very complicated situation where all the 3 patients had a lot of HLA antibodies against the tissue of their own donors. So their own donors, if they would have donated, they would have faced a very high risk of rejection, and it would not be a good outcome to have the kidney or any organ work for just a short time and die. So what we actually did was we found them donors from our registry which we established in 2018, that we found donors against whom they had absolutely no antibodies. So it is like we have a difficult situation which we converted into a very easy situation, and without going for very high risk immunosuppression, which is costly also, which is dangerous also for human beings because they can get infections. They all had a simple transplant which a normal human being can have without HLA antibodies. Now if you see the recipients, they got HLA antibodies because 2 of them have been transplanted before. One of them has had multiple pregnancies, because of which they got tissue from another human being in their body and they got antibodies. Now mind you, we have around 7 to 10% of such people coming to us for transplantation in today's world, because they have had transplants in the past and now they are failing. Because they may have had transplant 10 years back, 15 years back. These are the people who have a lot of HLA antibodies. So this type of an acceptable mismatch technology, or you can say a strategy which we are following, is giving a very low risk transplant to people who are otherwise very high risk. And these kidneys will last longer, because internationally literature says that desensitization or treatment of these antibodies for removal, even if you do it, the risk of rejection is going to be 30 to 35% despite the cost, despite taking the risk. So this becomes an easy way but a difficult way to achieve the transplants. And like Dr. Bipin said, that it was a daunting task for all the teams. I should say hats off to the transplant coordinators, the nurses, the OT teams, because as doctors we did our intellectual work, but all the groundwork and the paperwork and everything had to be done by our junior residents, by our nurses, by our OT teams, and the administration of course, and the transplant has gone off safely and successfully. So I think more and more awareness will help people get a lower risk transplant rather than going for high risk procedures which are brave but may not be good enough for a long term outcome. Thank you.
We are the ones who actually do the transplant, but the hard work is done by Bharat and Shruti and team, and it's a pleasure to work with people like them. I think Shruti is a trained immunologist, of which there are so few in the country today, and because of that we can do dominoes like this. And it's a tremendous benefit for the patients, because like Bharat always says, transplant is a cure, dialysis is only palliation in renal failure. So when they are getting dialyzed, they can't really have much of a life, because their entire energy goes in just getting dialyzed week after week, 3 times a week. Transplant completely cures them and they can go back to living a normal life, having children, everything is normalized once they are and get a transplant. And we are happy to carry out our part of the work, which is actually doing the physical transplant. We are the technicians in the transplant. We run a lab donor program, Bombay's only complete lab donor program, where every patient, the donor gives the kidney laparoscopically and is back to work and recovery very fast. And we also do robotic transplants, although in this case we didn't do any, because we were already stretched as a surgical team doing 6 patients at one time. All 6 patients are taken into the OT together, induced at the same time, and all 6 are operated together. So it puts a lot of strain on the surgical team. So doing a robotic transplant would add to that. So in this case we did all open transplants, but I'm glad to say that they all did very well and they all got normal renal function now. Thank you.
At that time when we were working towards cadaver transplant, I never thought that that would be possible in this country. But then technology has improved so much that from there we went to an ABO incompatible, and then now we are doing a domino transplant. For this particular transplant, I would say that my patient has been with me. She was on dialysis, and then her husband was worked up, and then to my surprise, she had a lot of antibodies against him. But then I needed a good immunological workup, and then thanks to Shruti, I know her for a long time, and I didn't want to take the risk of doing any immunological workup at Hyderabad, so I wanted Shruti to do it, and then she also said, she was sensitized against her husband, her brother, her uncle, and 2 other recipients from Hyderabad, and so we thought we had come to a stage where we had no other option. But at that time, God really sends us some His ways, and then Shruti worked out this domino transplant, and for logistic reasons, the transplant had to be done in Mumbai because the other 2 recipients and their donors are from Mumbai, and it would be easy for them for my patient to come here. But I must also at this time commend my patient and the donor. They would have made at least a dozen trips to Mumbai. They have been here for more than 2-3 months. It is not easy leaving their families. In fact, their son got recently married, but within 3-4 days of marriage, she was prepared to come to Mumbai and stay here for 15 days or more to have this transplant. So, with a positive outlook from all the 2 recipients, all the donors,
and came much later. The journey of children is little different and more, I feel sometimes more difficult than what adults go through, because many of them get kidney failure, at least 60% of them, because of some abnormalities present from birth, which may not cause them too much problem in the first few years, but slowly leads to multiple other problems like growth failure, bony problems, anemia, which often get missed and do not get recognized in time. So most of the time when we see them, they are already lost kidney function to less than 10%, and they need emergency dialysis and a plan for transplant. Now, both these children have had this long journey with one of them having multiple prior surgeries as well, Rudrakshi. So it requires a lot of courage for them to go through that and go through a transplant which didn't last very long because of, unfortunately, other problems like infections, etc., which occurred in between.
कुछ भी आया उसको अटैक करना है. अब ट्रांसप्लांट हमारे लिए अच्छी चीज़ है, लेकिन शरीर की प्रकृति को वो पता नहीं है, इसलिए हम उनको इम्यूनोसप्रेशन देते हैं, दवाई देते हैं कि इम्यूनिटी कम हो और रिजेक्शन ना हो. लेकिन अगर आपको पहले से आपके शरीर में ऐसे एंटीबॉडीज बने हुए हैं प्रीवियस ट्रांसफ्यूजन, प्रेगनेंसीज और ट्रांसप्लांट की वजह से, तो क्या होता है, वो एंटीबॉडीज जैसे ही ये किडनी आता है उसको अटैक कर देते हैं. अब ये चीज कब होती है, जब वो जो डोनर किडनी देने वाला है उसके विरुद्ध वाली एंटीबॉडीज हो, मतलब एकदम डोनर स्पेसिफिक, कि अगर डोनर का टिश्यू जो है उसी के अगेंस्ट है, जो हम अभी टेक्नोलॉजी से आइडेंटिफाई कर सकते हैं, तो उसका हम लिस्ट बनाते हैं कि भाई ये पेशेंट में कितने एंटीबॉडीज हैं और कौन से हैं. फिर हम ये देखते हैं कि भाई ये डोनर जो दे रहा है उनको यही टिश्यू तो नहीं है कि किडनी जाएगा और तुरंत रिजेक्ट हो जाएगा या थोड़ी देर में रिजेक्ट हो जाएगा. तो जितने एंटीबॉडीज होंगे उतना रिस्क ऑफ रिजेक्शन ज्यादा होगा, क्योंकि उसी का डर हमें रहता है कि अगर हमने नया ऑर्गन डाला है तो वो आदमी को जिंदा रखने के लिए, हेल्दी रखने के लिए लंबे दर्जे तक चलना चाहिए. अब ऐसे पेशेंट्स में जहाँ पहले से एंटीबॉडीज बने हुए, सब में नहीं होते, सिर्फ 8 से 10% पेशेंट्स में ऐसा होता है, तो उनको आइडेंटिफाई करके बाजू पे लेना पड़ता है कि भाई आप रेगुलर ट्रांसप्लांट करने जाओगे तो रिजेक्शन रिस्क बहुत बढ़ जाएगा. तो इनके केस में ऐसे मेरे पास अराउंड 45-50 पेशेंट्स है, इसलिए मैंने रजिस्ट्री बनाया था 2018 में, क्योंकि मुझे समझ में आ गया था कि ऐसे पेशेंट्स को हम नॉर्मल ट्रांसप्लांट नहीं दे सकते, जो इंटरनेशनली भी यही होता है. तो ये रजिस्ट्री द्वारा हम क्या करते हैं कि ऐसे पेयर्स ढूंढते हैं जो डोनर अगर हमने इनको दिया तो उनको उनके अगेंस्ट एंटीबॉडीज बने हुए नहीं है. तो इसको एक एक्सेप्टेबल मिसमैच बोलते हैं, मिसमैच बट एक्सेप्टेबल. हम लोग पहले मैच का बात कर, एवरेजली एंड देर आर पेशेंट्स ऑन माई लिस्ट जो अभी भी 1 साल 2 साल होने को आए, लेकिन इतने सारे एंटीबॉडीज हैं कि उनको अभी तक मैच नहीं मिल रहा है, बट वो रेगुलरली फॉलो अप करते हैं 3-3 महीने के इंटरवल में कि डॉक्टर कुछ मिला क्या, और उनको भी अगर उनके फैमिली में से कोई और डोनर मिलता है तो वो ले आते हैं कि इनके साथ हो रहा है क्या,
What
समथिंग
is
लाइक
the challenge of domino kidney transplant? Biggest challenge?
आई वुड से बिगेस्ट चैलेंज इज वन इज टू फाइंड अ डोनर, क्योंकि ये हेस्टैक में से सुई ढूंढने लायक है कि इतने सारे लोग हैं और इतनी सारी एंटीबॉडीज है, तो हमें एक परफेक्ट मेड इन हेवन मैच ढूंढना है, तो ये एक चीज है। दूसरा पेपर वर्क, अब जैसे एक पेशेंट तेलंगाना स्टेट से है और 2 पेशेंट्स महाराष्ट्र से है, पेपर वर्क्स में काफी टाइम लग जाता है, जो थोड़ा स्ट्रीमलाइन होते होते होगा अपने कंट्री में, लेकिन हो जाएगा। तो हैदराबाद का परमिशन मिलते हमको 6 महीने लग गए। महाराष्ट्र वॉज क्विक इनफ क्योंकि महाराष्ट्र में काफी स्वॉप्स होते हैं, बट जिस स्टेट के लिए नया है उनको तो पूरा पढ़ के करके फिर जाना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि ये लीगल इश्यू होता है कि भाई एक का डोनर दूसरे को दे रहा है, तो पेपर वर्क में अभी टाइम लगता है। एंड ऑफ कोर्स एक बार डोनर मिला उसके बाद तीनों फैमिलीज के स्केड्यूल्स भी बैठने चाहिए, वो भी एक चैलेंज था। किसी की एग्जाम है, 2 बच्चे हैं इसमें, किसी की एग्जाम थी, किसी की तबीयत ठीक नहीं थी, किसी को इन्फेक्शन था, तो डेट्स भी 3 से 4 बार चेंज हुए, इतना तक कि डॉक्टर प्रदीप राव हमेशा जोक करते थे कि श्रुति ये होने वाला है कि नहीं होने वाला।
ये जो डोमिनो इफेक्ट है, इनमें 3 ऑपरेशंस एक साथ हुए थे, 6 पेशेंट्स थे, इसके बारे में बताएं कि ऐसा क्यों जरूरी हो गया था कि तीनों को साथ में लाना पड़ा।
वर्कअप किया है तो इम्पोर्टेंट है उनका किडनी फंक्शन कैसा है। अगर किडनी फंक्शन अच्छा है और अगर उनको मोस्टली अनकंट्रोल्ड डायबिटीज नहीं है तो ये लोगों को हम डोनर करके दे सकते हैं। और ऑल्सो एनाटॉमी वो किडनी का इम्पोर्टेंट है, कितने ब्लड वेसल है, एक किडनी में 3-4 ब्लड वेसल रहते हैं, वो सूटेबल नहीं रहते डोनर के लिए लेने के लिए, तो हम लोग सीटी स्कैन करके देख लेते हैं, अगर वो किडनी सूटेबल है किडनी स्कैन करके देख लेते हैं फंक्शन कितना है। ये 2 चीज के ऊपर मेनली हम ले सकते हैं।